You see, there comes a moment in every storm when the thunder fades and all that's left is silence, still, sharp, final. That's the kind of goodbye I'm talking about. The kind that don't need no words, no screaming, no tears, just presence, just power. Because when you walk away from a narcissist, when you finally stand up and turn your back, you ain't just leaving a person. You're leaving a prison, a cycle, a lie. And they feel that. Oh, they feel that. They feel it in the pit of their soul, the part they keep hidden from the world and even from themselves. Because they never thought you'd do it. They never expected the one they fed off, the one they manipulated, the one they thought was too kind, too patient, too forgiving, would ever find the strength to leave without looking back. But you did. And let me tell you something. That's where the guilt begins. Not guilt like you or I know it, not the kind that changes people. No. It's the kind that stings like a wound they can't show. It's shame wearing a mask. It's regret hidden behind blame. It's the late night silence after the spotlight goes out and there ain't nobody left clapping. You see, a narcissist don't crumble when you fight them. They feed off the fight. They twist it, turn it, use it. But when you leave in peace, in dignity, when you say nothing, not because you're weak, but because you've outgrown their chaos, that's when their house of cards starts to fall. You were their mirror, their audience, their emotional fuel. But now that reflection is gone and they're left staring at themselves. That's a horror show they can't survive. And you start to rise, not in spite, not in anger, but in power, real power, the kind that don't need revenge, the kind that don't wait for closure, the kind that says, I choose me, and that's enough. Every step you take without them is a nail in the coffin of the story they tried to write for you. Every smile you wear, every bit of peace you take, that's your message. That's your justice. They'll watch, they'll wonder, they'll regret, and they'll feel that goodbye in places they never show. Because the strongest goodbye is the one that don't look back. And that right there, that breaks them, that haunts them, that reminds them they lost the very best thing they never deserved. A narcissist's worst fear is losing control, because control is the very foundation of how they operate in relationships. It's not love they seek, it's power. They don't want connection, they want compliance. To them, every interaction is a transaction, every emotional exchange, a test of dominance. They groom their victims slowly, skillfully, with praise and attention, until the other person begins to depend on them for approval, direction, and self-worth. That dependency gives the narcissist the upper hand. They hold the reins. They dictate the terms of emotional engagement. They build a world where they are the sun and everyone else just revolves around them. Operation Dynamite is not just about a rallying. It is a duel. This illusion of control gives the narcissist a deep sense of superiority. They're not interested in mutual understanding or healthy compromise. They want to shape your thoughts, your choices, even your identity. They'll tell you what you should feel, who you should be, how you should think. And if you challenge that, they shift gears. From charming to cold, from affectionate to cruel. They gaslight, deny, twist your reality until you begin to doubt your own judgment. That's how control deepens. It's not just about making decisions for you. It's about dismantling your confidence so you no longer trust your own voice. Now, here's the part they never see coming. You waking up. You're starting to see through the fog. You're no longer reacting the way you used to. You're no longer explaining yourself, defending yourself, begging to be heard. You're no longer feeding the beast they built their ego on. That's when they panic. Not because they love you, but because their power is slipping. The grip is loosening. Their game is ending. Walking away, especially without chaos, hits them harder than any argument ever could. When you leave calmly, firmly, with your dignity intact, you do what they never prepared for. You take your power back. They expected you to fall apart, to chase after them, to fight for validation. They never imagined you'd have the strength to say no more and actually mean it. That choice, that moment, that quiet but final exit, it sends shockwaves through their entire sense of identity. You see, control isn't just something they enjoy, it's something they need. Without it, they feel exposed, vulnerable, small. And nothing threatens a narcissist more than realizing they don't have the power they believed they had. They built their entire identity on being the puppeteer, and suddenly the strings are cut, the show is over. That's the crack in their armor, is where their fear lives. Not in being alone, not in being wrong, but in no longer being able to control the narrative. When you reclaim your voice, when you stand in your truth, when you say goodbye and mean it, you become the one writing the final chapter, and they are left with the silence, a silence that screams of their failure to keep you in their web, a silence that reminds them they never had as much power as they thought. And in that silence, in that powerless space where they once held control, they're left to face what they truly are, alone, broken, and utterly incapable of facing a version of life where they don't get to pull the strings. Goodbye with dignity is one of the most powerful acts a person can offer in the aftermath of narcissistic abuse. It doesn't come from weakness, nor from fear. It comes from a quiet strength, a strength that refuses to give the narcissist what they crave most: attention, emotional chaos, and a reason to feel superior. Narcissists thrive in messy endings. They want drama, conflict, and emotional outbursts. They want the screaming, the crying, the endless arguments. All of it feeds their ego. It makes them feel important. It validates their belief that they matter more, that they are worth fighting over, that they have the ability to control someone even as things fall apart. But when you walk away calmly, without rage, without threats, without begging, it confuses them. It unsettles them in a way that anger never could. Because anger to them is still engagement. It still means they have access to your emotions. Even if you're furious, you're still reacting to them. You're still showing them that they matter, that you're hurt, that they're powerful enough to get under your skin. But when you detach, when your goodbye comes with silence instead of chaos, it leaves them with nothing. No energy to feed on, no story to twist, no moment to spin into their own narrative of being the victim or the hero. That quiet goodbye is a mirror, a reflection they cannot handle. It shows them who they really are. Not the dominant figure they like to imagine, but someone being left without a scene. That hits a part of their psyche they keep hidden, even from themselves. It awakens shame. The kind they bury beneath layers of arrogance, because in that moment, they're not the one in control. They're the one being walked away from. And there's no fight to manipulate, no apology to fake, no performance left to put on. You see, dignity isn't just about how you walk out. It's about who you are when you do it. It's the refusal to lower yourself to their level. It's the decision to let them sit with the weight of their own actions without offering them the distraction of your pain. Narcissists can't grow from guilt, but they do feel the sting of not being able to provoke a reaction. They are masters of emotional provocation. They know how to poke, prod, and pull at your insecurities, But when you stop reacting, when you respond only with calm distance, it leaves them powerless. And there is nothing more unbearable to a narcissist than powerlessness. That's why goodbye with dignity is not just an exit, it's a statement. It tells them, you no longer have access to me. You no longer have the power to pull me into your storm. You no longer get to control the story of who I am or how I leave. It's a declaration of emotional independence. And even if they won't admit it, they feel that loss deeply. Because in their world, people are supposed to orbit them. People are supposed to break trying to leave, but you didn't break. You chose peace. You chose yourself. That kind of ending haunts them not because they lost someone they loved, but because they lost someone they thought would never wake up. They miscalculated. They believed their manipulation was permanent. That's the wound they carry after your silent departure. It's not your anger that hurts them. It's your absence. It's not your tears. It's your strength. And it's not revenge that breaks them. It's your unshakable decision to rise without them. The narcissist never expected you to leave. From the very beginning, they designed the relationship in a way that made them the center of your world. They groomed you with charm, flattery, and intense attention to create a powerful emotional bond. They studied your weaknesses, your needs, your desires, and shaped themselves into exactly what you thought you needed. They made themselves feel irreplaceable. Slowly, they conditioned you to prioritize their approval, their emotions, and their reality above your own. So when conflict arose, they twisted the truth, blamed you, and made you feel responsible for everything that went wrong. And even though it hurt, even though you knew something wasn't right, you stayed because they made you believe you had to. This is why narcissists rarely believe the people they manipulate will ever walk away. In their mind, they've done enough damage to your self-worth to make leaving seem impossible. They count on your empathy. They exploit your loyalty. They expect you to doubt yourself more than you doubt them. Every time you forgave them, every time you tried to understand them, every time you hoped things would get better, they took that as proof that you wouldn't leave. Not because they loved you, but because they believed they broke your will to go. They mistook your compassion for weakness. They mistook your endurance for dependence. So when you finally decide you've had enough, when you reach that quiet, firm inner decision that you're done, it throws them into a mental free fall. You were never supposed to find that strength. You were never supposed to choose yourself over them. Your goodbye is something they never planned for because in their eyes, they were the ones in control. They thought they owned your emotional reactions, your decisions, your view of the relationship. And when you step away with clarity and resolve, it shatters their illusion. They may not show it on the outside. In fact, they'll likely act indifferent, cold, even smug. They'll say things like, I knew you'd leave, or you never really cared. That's the mask. That's the act. But behind the act is panic. Behind the act is disbelief, because deep down, they know they didn't see it coming. You leaving means their control is gone. The supply they took for granted is cut off. The narrative they built, the one where you always return, always forgive, always beg, is destroyed. This unexpected departure also forces them to confront a reality they avoid at all costs, that they are not as powerful as they think they are. It forces them to realize that someone they manipulated, devalued, and dismissed is capable of walking away with strength. That realization creates a rupture in their ego. They don't just lose a partner, they lose a mirror that constantly reflected their desired image back to them. Without that reflection, they are left with themselves, and what they see in that empty space is often something they can't bear to face. The moment you leave without seeking validation, without demanding answers, without needing closure, it disarms them. They don't know how to respond to silence. They don't know how to fight calm confidence. They don't know how to manipulate someone who has stopped playing the game. Your departure becomes more than just the end of a relationship. It becomes a collapse of the story they told themselves about their power, their charm, and their ability to keep people under their influence. So when you walk away, it doesn't just surprise them, it shakes them. They'll try to spin it, pretend they're unbothered, maybe even move on quickly to someone new, but deep down, the moment stays with them. It echoes, it haunts, because they never expected it. And that's what makes it hit the hardest. They will feel the loss, but won't admit it, because to a narcissist, vulnerability is weakness and accountability is a threat. When you leave a narcissist, there is an impact, an undeniable shift in their world, even if they never show it. While they may act unaffected or move on quickly to someone else, it is often nothing more than a performance, a distraction from the emptiness that follows your absence. They do not grieve like others do, not because they don't feel, but because they are not equipped to sit with uncomfortable emotions like shame, regret, or guilt. Those feelings expose the very flaws they've spent their lives hiding behind: charm, manipulation, and false confidence. Your absence strips away their emotional supply, the admiration, the attention, the validation they so desperately rely on. You are a source of energy for them, a mirror that reflected back their inflated image of self. Through your empathy, love, and repeated forgiveness, they received the emotional fuel they needed to maintain their illusion of superiority. But once you're gone, the fuel is gone. The game changes. They begin to experience a hollow space they cannot fill with ego alone. It's not love they mourn, it's the loss of control, the collapse of the dynamic they engineered so carefully. Still, they won't show it. Narcissists are masters of denial. They are invested in appearing untouchable, powerful, and emotionally independent, even when inside they are spiraling. They will say things to mutual friends that downplay the relationship. They'll rewrite the story, casting themselves as the one who was wronged or as someone who had already emotionally checked out long before you left. They'll pretend to be unbothered, sometimes even happier without you, not because it's true, but because they're terrified of what it means to admit that someone had the strength to walk away from them. Even in private, they struggle to process the loss honestly. To acknowledge the impact of your absence would be to acknowledge their failure, that they pushed someone away, that their behavior had consequences. But narcissists have fragile egos built on avoidance of responsibility. Admitting fault is dangerous to their sense of self, so instead, they blame, they justify, they deflect. If they feel anything resembling guilt, they twist it into anger toward you. They convince themselves that you are ungrateful, disloyal, or too emotional. It's easier to make you the problem than to face the truth of what they've lost. Yet deep within, they are aware of what's missing. Late at night, in the silence they try to drown out, they feel it. In the absence of your voice, your patience, your emotional warmth, they feel it. When they reach for someone new and find only surface level admiration that doesn't compare to what they had, they feel it. They won't talk about it. They won't admit it to anyone. But the memory of your presence lingers. The way you stood by them, the way you tried, the way you cared, all of that becomes a quiet ghost that haunts them. And what stings most is not just the fact that you're gone, but the way you left, with clarity, with strength, without asking for their permission or their validation. That is a wound they carry silently. They will continue the performance, acting as if nothing has changed, but underneath, they are chasing a sense of control that slipped through their fingers. And no matter how many distractions they create, how many people they tried to replace you with, that specific emptiness, the space you once filled, remains. because deep down, they know. They feel the loss. They just don't have the courage to face it. Their healing is their silent punishment because it represents everything they tried to take from you and everything they failed to destroy. When you begin to rebuild yourself after leaving a narcissist, it forces them to confront the reality that their power was never absolute. You start to find peace, rediscover your voice, regain your strength, and piece together the parts of yourself they tried to fracture. That transformation doesn't require revenge or confrontation. It doesn't demand a dramatic statement or even their acknowledgement. It simply unfolds quietly, powerfully in your growth. And that growth becomes the one thing they can't control, spin, or manipulate. To the narcissist, healing is betrayal. Not because you did something wrong, but because you chose to exist outside of their influence. Narcissists live in a world where they are the center, where every narrative is crafted to reflect their importance. So when you begin to move forward, when you start laughing again, trusting yourself, thriving without them, it contradicts the story they've told themselves and others. They may have painted you as broken, weak, lost without them. They may have needed to believe you would fall apart the moment they were gone, but your healing proves them wrong. And that truth cuts deeper than any insult ever could. They won't show you how much it stings. They'll pretend not to notice, but they watch. Maybe through mutual contacts, maybe through silent social media observations, maybe just in the way they bring your name up to others in subtle, bitter tones. They notice your light coming back. They see you stepping into your life with confidence. And while they may be surrounded by new people or distractions, nothing replaces the image of you rising from the pain they thought would keep you down. And it unsettles them because if you can heal, then they didn't break you. And if they didn't break you, then all their efforts were in vain. That realization is a hit to their ego. Narcissists feed off the belief that they leave a permanent imprint on others, that they are unforgettable, irreplaceable, and always in control. Watching you heal undermines that belief. It reminds them that they are not as powerful as they imagined. It also brings an uncomfortable truth to the surface, that the problem wasn't you, it was them. Your healing, your peace, your ability to smile again, it all becomes evidence that they were the source of the pain, not the cure for it. That kind of realization is unbearable for someone who avoids accountability at all costs. And while you may never hear it from them, your recovery forces them to question their narrative. They might lash out, send messages, try to stir the pot just to see if they can still trigger a reaction. But when you remain calm, indifferent, and focused on your own journey, it frustrates them. It reminds them that their influence is fading, that your growth is now self-corrected, that their chapter in your story has closed and they no longer get to write or edit it. Your healing also inspires something they don't understand. Respect, not the kind they'll express openly, but the quiet recognition that you had the courage to face what they couldn't. You looked at the damage, owned your pain, and chose to grow. Narcissists rarely do that. They run from the truth, bury their shame, and project their wounds onto others. Watching someone rise from the very fire they set can feel like a kind of justice they can't escape because it reveals what they lack. Not charm, not control, but real strength. The strength to change, to reflect, to grow. So every step you take toward wholeness becomes a reminder to them of what they failed to achieve, your destruction. And even in their silence, they feel it. Not because you said anything, but because you didn't have to. Your healing spoke for itself. Closure is yours to claim, especially when dealing with a narcissist who will never give you the kind of ending your heart once hoped for. In a healthy relationship, closure often comes from mutual understanding, honest conversation, or an expression of regret and accountability. But with a narcissist, waiting for that moment is like waiting for the rain in the desert. It rarely, if ever, comes. That's because narcissists aren't interested in resolving the past or giving you peace. They're interested in preserving control, protecting their ego, and avoiding responsibility. So instead of honesty, they offer blame. Instead of reflection, they offer denial. And instead of closure, they offer confusion. But closure isn't something you need to beg for or chase. It isn't something another person holds the power to give or deny. Closure is a decision. It's the moment you stop waiting for validation and start trusting your own voice. It's the shift from needing their explanation to understanding your own truth. You don't need them to say sorry. You don't need them to acknowledge the hurt they caused. You already know what happened. You already lived it, felt it, survived it. That lived experience is more than enough to justify your decision to walk away and heal. What often keeps people stuck is the hope that the narcissist will one day wake up, realize the damage they caused, and come back with genuine remorse. But that hope is rooted in the belief that you were never enough. That maybe if you had said or done something differently, things would have ended with more dignity or love. That's the trap. Because the narcissist benefits from your uncertainty. They want you to stay confused, to keep wondering, to continue looking back. It's a way to maintain control long after the relationship ends. And if you keep reaching out, keep asking for answers, you're giving them exactly what they want: access to your peace. Choosing closure on your own terms means you take back your story. You decide that the silence is your answer. You accept that there may never be an apology, and that's okay. You learn to be okay with the unanswered questions, because those questions lose their power once you decide they don't matter as much as your healing. Closure becomes the moment you turn your attention inward, away from their chaos and back to your own strength. It's when you say, I may not have gotten what I deserved from them, but I'm going to give it to myself now. There's something profoundly liberating about realizing you don't need the final word. You don't need to convince them of your worth or make them see what they lost. Your worth isn't up for debate. It was never about their recognition. It was about your ability to rise, to rebuild, and to reclaim your life on your own terms. That's real closure, not a conversation, not a text, not a sudden change of heart from someone who never truly valued you. Real closure is the quiet strength of choosing to move forward without needing to look back. And even though it hurts, even though part of you still wonders what might have been, you begin to see that closure isn't a gift you wait for. It's a boundary you create. It's a choice to stop bleeding for someone who wouldn't even hand you a bandage. It's choosing to heal, not because they finally understood your pain, but because you finally decided your peace matters more than their validation. That's the kind of closure they can't take from you. That's the kind of closure that sets you free. The most powerful goodbye isn't loud. It doesn't come with rage or revenge. It comes with clarity, silence, and self-respect. When you walk away from a narcissist, not to hurt them, but to heal yourself, you reclaim every piece of power they tried to steal. You leave behind the chaos, the confusion, the false narratives, and you step into a life shaped by your truth, not their control. And while they may never admit the impact you had, deep down, they feel the loss, they feel the shift, and they feel the weight of your absence. Because in the end, the goodbye that breaks them the most is the one you give without fear, without need, and without ever looking back.